Using reflections in your street photography can be a great way to introduce depth, layering and abstraction to your images. Especially if you're a beginner street photographer, utilising reflections means that you can include the human element in your photographs without directly taking photographs of people. No matter where you are, there's always the opportunity to use reflections out on the street to create interesting street photographs. When you start going out with your camera looking specifically for reflections, it can open you up to a whole new way of seeing, as well as lots of different new opportunities to make interesting photographs. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 quick tips that you can use to give you some ideas when you're out with your camera to incorporate reflections in your street photography. The first tip is to look for and to photograph reflective surfaces. Cars, wet pavement, puddles, windows, signs that might be about on the street. All of those different surfaces give great opportunities to use the reflections from in your image. So for example, what initially attracted me to this scene was this car and the colour that was reflecting off of the car. And I thought, okay, this is quite a cool opportunity here. I might be able to make something out of this. And so I just had a little look around the car, working out where I wanted to point my camera to include that kind of colour bouncing off the car. And then the shapes and lines and the textures that were on the car's surface to then make hopefully an interesting image. So all I needed to do then was just wait for a subject to kind of walk through the frame to be reflected into the car as well, to just bring it all together. And it all just came from noticing the shape of the car and then noticing the reflection. So actively looking for reflections around me, colours bouncing back at me from reflections, and then trying to work a way to find a composition that makes an interesting photograph really. So it's definitely a great idea to try just looking for reflective surfaces next time you're out. Then you'll just notice suddenly things popping up everywhere. You'll notice cool reflections. You might want to spend some time to watch people walk through the scene to see where they reflect in certain surfaces, to then work out how you might want to compose an interesting photograph from that scene. So the next tip is to incorporate text and window displays in your reflection street photographs. So for example, in this image, I've composed a shot using the O that was part of the name of the shop on the window itself. I've used the O to then subframe the subject, which is a person walking past, which gives an extra layer and also interest using that subframing technique, and then the colour to really make an engaging photograph. You can also use the text from window displays to just kind of give a pop of colour in your images. Depending on how you use your camera settings, you'll get different effects when you photograph text that's on a window. So for example, if you use a wide f-stop on your camera, you're going to blur the text that's on the window. So if you're to do that, then you can then use that blurring effect to add some colour in, a bit of abstraction. If you can then build up the layers in the photograph, you'll be able to use that extra added pop of colour from the text to your advantage. If you were to change your lens to a narrower f-stop, you might then need to bump the ISO to just give you more light in the camera, but the narrow f-stop on your lens will then make the text sharper on the window. Then it makes it more recognisable for the viewer as to what it is. They might be able to read the text. Then that can add some extra interest in a different way than if you'd obscured the text in your image. So the great thing about using reflections in street photography is the amount of experimentation you can do. The same scene can look different depending on how you set the settings on your camera, which is just really exciting because every time you go out there with your camera now and you're looking for reflections, there's so many opportunities available to you. It just gives you more things to focus on, gives you more things to look out for, gives you more things to shoot, especially if you live in a small town like I do, or a boring place. When you're looking for reflection shots, you can make something really interesting out of what is generally a mundane scene. So you can build up the layers slowly in your image, and when you're working out the composition, you can add in your reflective surface, you can add in window text, you can add in the human element, add in a bit of colour, and then once you've added in all these elements, you can end up making a really complex but engaging photograph that's a one-off. And the third tip is to isolate subjects in your reflection shots. So for example, if you see someone wearing an interesting outfit that's maybe a colourful skirt, for example, and they're walking past you down the street, you could just take a photograph of them just like that. You know, depending on the light, it might make for a nice image, and the composition, depending on what they're wearing and their stance and stuff like that. But what you could do is just turn to then capture that person, but in a reflection. So if you're maybe looking into a shop window, you can use that window as the reflection. You can watch other people walking past, and maybe you've staked out the area for a bit and you're just waiting for an interesting subject to come through. When that subject comes through, you can then isolate them in your reflection shot, and then the texture of the glass, maybe it's warped a bit, it would then give an extra layer of abstraction. It might make some different interesting shapes, which then just elevates the photograph. It gives something for the viewer to look at that's different. It's not just a visual representation of exactly what you see on the street, i.e. someone just walking down the street who looks cool, but then you're just adding in that extra element, extra layer, extra interest for the viewer to look at, absorb and enjoy. So in this photograph that I really like, I noticed the window first, which I thought would make a great subframe, and then the texture inside the window with the wire sort of lattice. And all I needed to do was wait for an interesting subject to walk past or kind of get framed up inside that subframe inside the image, and that would make for a great photograph. So I stood there for 3 or 4 minutes, framing it up and waiting for someone to walk past, and then this lady came past in this red scarf. Perfect. Snapped the shot, bam. It's important to add though, especially in the case of this photograph, that when you're just looking at reflections, you can often forget, well at least I often forget, that there might be people behind the glass looking at you thinking, why is this person standing there staring at me, taking a photograph of me through the glass? Just bear that in mind when you're out. There might be people behind the surfaces that you're photographing. You might not be able to see them or notice them because you're looking at the reflection that's bouncing off the surface, but they'll notice you, and that can make for a bit of an awkward situation sometimes. Like this picture, the lady was there for a while on her phone, so I thought I'd just spend a bit more time getting the right shot. Didn't realise that there was someone sitting right in front of the window staring out at me, getting a little bit annoyed. So they grabbed their coat and put their hands up in their coat to block the view from me, which took me completely by surprise. I was like, what's going on there? And then it clicked what was happening. And anyway, I took the photograph and it actually made for a really cool image. So you can see this person's hands there, and it almost looks like they're kind of puppeteering the person in the middle of the shot. So that was a happy accident, but also made me feel a little bit awkward afterwards when I realised what happened. So yeah, just bear that in mind next time you're out taking street photographs. With reflections, there might be people behind the surface that you're taking photographs of. Reflection photographs are a great way for beginners to get into taking photographs of people. You know, you can use a reflective surface to take a photograph of an interesting person walking past, and they've got no idea you're taking a photograph of them. Whereas if you're new, it might take you a bit more anxiety to actually then point the camera at them and take the photograph of the person. If you're using a reflection, it might make for a more interesting shot anyway. So it's a great way to really experiment without kind of getting noticed by people. The thing that I like the most about using reflections in street photography is that you can add that extra mystery, abstraction, texture, which can then really elevate your images. And often you can then create unrepeatable moments, which is just great in street photography. If you'd like to find out some more ideas and tips on creating mystery and curiosity in your street photography, then check out this video here. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.